South Boston Speedway, a series classic. Many of the drivers who take part in the Bootleg Racing League know this track well. It's a facility that was one of the original oval rookie tracks. Many great battles between the best in the series have taken place here with its tight confines and tough side-by-side racing for much of the field. Tonight, its Grand National Series looks to add a new page of lore to its fabled track. Who will take home the checker flag tonight? We're about to find out on the Global SimRacing Channel. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the virtual Sobo Speedway for the 5th race of Season 6 for the Bootleg Racing League's Grand National Series. I'm Justin Prince. Alongside the booth tonight is Evan Pasocco. Behind the scenes is our director, Sean Ambrose, and he is using cameras provided by Dougie Beard. Before we get into the details for tonight's action, let's take a look at your GSRC track guide to learn more about South Boston Speedway.
Welcome to South Boston, Virginia, and perhaps the most well-known short track to iRacers, South Boston Speedway. Opened in 1957, this 4/10-mile track with limited banking is where many of the old drivers in iRacing got their start. The track served as an original launch partner with the service and has long been a hotbed of Legend Series drivers learning the ropes on the sim. South Boston is a challenging short track. Your best success usually comes hugging that yellow line. But buyer beware, pit walls extend into turns 1 and 3, and they are unforgiving. And even more daunting perhaps, the barriers protecting the pit entrance off turn 4, which are sure to end your race if you spin low on corner exit. Located in the heart of NASCAR country, Sobo, as it's locally known, hosted the Cup Series up until 1971, with the Xfinity Series and the NASCAR trucks racing here into the 2000s. Today, Sobo's a favorite of drivers in the NASCAR modified ranks. It's also seen frequent visits from the former NASCAR East Series. The track also plays host to weekly NASCAR late model action and other touring late model and super late model events as well. On a Saturday night at South Boston, you're likely to see a future NASCAR star. Sobo has served as a proving ground for future NASCAR winners and champions. That's your look at South Boston Speedway. Now it's your turn to try to conquer Sobo. Let's go short track racing.
That's a look at your GSRC track guide for Sobo Speedway. Now let's bring my broadcast partner for tonight, Evan Pasocco, a very familiar name in sim racing to say the very least, and this is a very familiar track to these drivers, especially when it comes to the Chevrolet National Impala these drivers will be racing in tonight.
It's fun to be back at the booth, Justin, for Bootleg Racing League event, and fun to be back at Sobo, known across the country as America's hometown track, 0.4 miles in length. As we get set to go racing tonight, 12 degrees of banking in the corner, alongside with 10 degrees on the straightaways, and as is standard fare here on a Saturday night, going to be racing for 100 laps tonight on the short track, Justin. This is a physical racetrack as well. That pit wall keeps things tight, both on the front and the back straightaway, so these drivers might get physical fighting for some spots over the course of the night.
It's going to make things very interesting indeed for tonight. Let's take a look at what's been an interesting championship run so far for James Lowe, where he leads by 20 points for Ruben Altis and 21 points over a tie for third place between Austin Belke and Jason Menda. 28 points back is Joseph Segal, who's coming off a win in the Tour modified race earlier tonight, leading all 80 laps. While rounding out the top 5 is a tie for 5th between Kurt Smith and Jeffrey Harding. Keep in mind that J.R. Shepard has not taken part in a majority of the races this season due to various commitments, which has really shooken up these championship standings this season. Now let's take a look at the race details as mentioned by Evan. 100 laps for tonight, but it's going to be interesting how these drivers fare for the 5th round, Evan.
Yeah, because it is a pretty long race. I mean, not that long mileage-wise, but the racetrack, as I mentioned before, just clocking in at under a half a mile in distance, but you're not going to have tire changes. You're going to have to work those Hoosier Racing tires over the course of this entire race. You will have that opportunity, though, to have one faster pair. Now, most drivers are going to opt to not want to burn that at all tonight. If you're getting a quick fix, it means you're hurt. You're going to the back of the field regardless. So it is a short track. I mentioned earlier, there's a chance of them getting physical. But you do want to keep the race car as clean as you can. And of course, we're going to invert the top 8 finishers from last race on the grid tonight. So going to put some of those faster cars back in traffic. We'll see if they're able to navigate these big, bulky stock cars on a tight racetrack like Sobo.
As these drivers continue to make their way around for practice tonight, it is mostly cloudy skies for these contenders. 78 degrees is your air temp at the moment, 82 degrees your track temp. The wind's currently gusting to the southwest at 4 miles an hour, humidity at 66% for tonight's action. So fairly cloudy for tonight's action. And under the lights for tonight's racing action in sim time is approaching 8:30. But some of the constants for tonight. J.R. Shepard is back for tonight's race. He'll be having one of our onboard cameras for tonight. He is second on the board, in fact, tied at the top of the board with Justin Morton in practice so far, Evan.
Hey, that's a dead heat right now between those two drivers at the top of the board, and it looks like that most of these drivers at the moment are trying to put a little bit of a longer run in as you'll see him drive down to the pit lane. But for the likes of Morton up top, he's not hot lapping at the moment, right? We talked about that invert. Typically, if you're worried about a race that has an open qualifier or even a single car qualifier where that's going to set the grid, you're going to be worried about putting in some hot laps. I'd be curious what those drivers stack up with in a 5-lap run, a 10-lap run, right, compared to each other. But that's by most drivers as you go on board with the top car. The number 9, Justin Morton. Long run just in practice late in this practice session.
And when it comes to these cars, keep in mind it can be so tricky to drive around a track like Sobo because one of the constants that came up for both the street stocks and the modifieds earlier tonight, Evan, is the difficulty to pass here. Drivers were lined up at a conga line in the Tour Modified race, 6 cars back for a good portion of the race, trying to battle with Joseph Scala.
Oh yeah, and look at the 61 machine of Seneca up on the outside wall as we take an on-board look with him, rocking the VR goggles tonight. Currently third for the bottom of the board, and look out in front of Spinner as he tries to work through Justin. You saw when he was up on the outside in 1 and 2. That's just not a great line here at Sobo, right? These cars are going to be down on that yellow line. So you talk about the conga line, opportunities to pass are going to come either when somebody makes a mistake, they wash up off of the corner, maybe catch the fence a little bit and getting a little bit tight. We'll see how those conditions work as we race deeper into the evening and track temps start to come down a little bit. But it's certainly true that the bottom is going to be the place to be, so track position's big, but that's where that chrome horn may come in. These Impala National cars on the service are so much fun, especially at a racetrack like the virtual South Boston Speedway. So I'm really looking forward to tonight's action, and when you got the top 2 cars at the top of the board in a dead heat on the practice charts, I think that's a sign that things are pretty tight all throughout the field, with the exception of Bruce Pearson at the bottom of the 22, who's looking for a little bit more. Everybody else is separated by just over 0.2 of a second. So there's pretty good competition top to bottom here tonight.
16.370 for Pearson. For reference sake, 15.7s at the top of the board. Matthew Thunhorst, who was the winner at 5 Flags with 15.788, is third. James Lowe, your championship leader, 15.805. Rounded out the top 5 is Donnie Moore. As let's take a look at the boss man, Lowell Jewell, currently making his way around the racetrack, currently 14th on the practice charts, and you can see just how much wheel input he's having to put around this racetrack.
That is a lot of wheel input on board with that number 19 Heelan Waters Fly Fishing Dodge Charger, and you just giving it a lot right now. Somebody else in Lowell's case who's out there for a couple of laps and trying to get I think a consistent basis. There's always a chance that these things can open up, they can go green. It is short track racing, so we expect there to be some level of physicality, but you do need to be prepared for the long run tonight. And certainly something that Lowell's working on is he'll go down to the inside of the 61 of Seneca, who seems to be up top every time we catch in with him. We talked about drivers looking for consistency. I think these are 2 drivers who still need just a little bit more.
And I think all the attention now has to go towards the driver just set your fastest lap in practice so far. It was an impressive victory, Evan, for Matthew Thunhorst last week. He is somebody who competes in the major series as well, looking to gain oval experience, and has been showing some great speed so far throughout the series in all of its Saturday night racing action so far. Looking to try and add another victory, made history by becoming one of just a few drivers to win in the Grand National Series at 5 Flags.
Yeah, you talk about all the different series that you can get here with the Bootleg Racing League and long-standing. I mentioned, good to be back on a Saturday night call here on the Global SimRacing Channel, and, all these drivers involved in so many different disciplines. It was always my favorite thing to look and compare how somebody would stack up in the different series, and if the common denominator were the cars over the tracks, right? If you're good at a track, can you translate that to speed across all the different divisions? But of course, you talk about the win for Thunhorse, not somebody who's at the top in those championship standings that we talked about. Low leading the way with just one trip to victory lane, Justin, nearly past the halfway point, basically right on the money there in this series, and going to be a lot of racing throughout the month of May, off it into June as we crown a 2021 Season 2 champion. And this is one of the shorter tracks of any of them on the calendar.
Taking a look at Austin Belke is laser focused as per usual in the cockpit meanwhile, and for him, he's having his best season so far, Evan, in this series. Tied for top 3 in the points as talked about, but he's going to have to be careful tonight because one of the constants at Five Flags was big ones. 2 track blocking incidents occurred during the race, and he's one of the drivers that has a warning entering tonight. Donnie Moore, Mark Herzog, Kurt Smith, Mike Allen also received warnings at Five Flags. Mark Herzog also a 1-race suspension for disrespectful communications. So while you mentioned wanting to potentially use the chrome horn, you're going to have to be careful because if you end up causing a major incident, then it may see you miss a race.
And sometimes that's what you need, right, to keep the boys in check. When you're doing this kind of short track racing on a week-by-week basis, things can get out of hand if you leave those things unpoliced. And I think that's why the admins need to keep them on a tight leash. It is not easy, by the way, with the way these kind of low and sloped front bumpers line up with the high rear ends in these cars. You can't just run through somebody and expect that to be a good bump and run and move on through. If you're going to put a move on somebody, it has to be deliberate and it has to be calculated. You can't just be running through people, and that's where the discipline comes into play. As you take a look at the number 26 car on track, Donnie Moore right now, middle of the road in the practice session, sits P6. Race it around that 6. That's Kurt Smith up on the outside, one of the drivers you had previously mentioned. And J.R. Shepard just behind the number 98 car. That Ford Fusion, 3rd on the board, was previously tied with Morton. So I know I pointed out the long runs, but with Thunhorse going to the top of the board, wouldn't be shocked if maybe somebody else sneaks in with a late fast time. As you see the clock top left of your screen, 2 minutes, 40 seconds, and counting down before we go racing.
Now, when it comes to your time in sim racing, when it comes to commentating, a long time ago, this is when you first started, we were talking about this a little bit. One of the series you commentated, I believe, was the Bootleg Racing League. What were some of your favorite memories from back in the day from commentating, and what kind of comes up to mind now seeing potentially some of those same names here on the racetrack tonight?
Well, that's it. It's the names, right? A lot has changed, not to date myself, but a lot has changed in sim racing over the last 6-7 years, and it's continued to grow immensely as a platform, especially in the last 1 or 2 calendar years with some national exposure it's gotten with a lot of the pro drivers involved, right? But the biggest thing is the names, right? Obviously the Lowell Jewels in charge of this thing, and just the fact that they've been able to keep this structure together of Saturday night short track racing, keeping the multiple divisions going, keeping some of the names in action, and keeping it here on GSRC, I think is the coolest thing, Justin, because you and I both know we've seen dozens, if not hundreds, of leagues come and go. I just love that the Bootleg Racing League is still here to put on a show for us on a night-by-night basis.
Love that as well, especially with its roots all the way back from the 1990s. When you think back to some of the predecessors to iRacing, making its iRacing debut back in 2013. By the way, to recap your top 10 of the practice charts, Thunhorse still with a 15.758. Morton and Shepard tied for second with the 7.82 in the 15-second bracket. James Lowe, Austin Belke, the top 5 so far. Donnie Moore, Brian Dean, followed by Mike Lemieux, rounding out the top positions inside the top 8 on the board. On that note, though, what are your keys to victory for this type of a race tonight, Evan, if you want to take the checker flag here at Sobo?
Well, I was torn because I could think that it could be the track position, but I don't think you necessarily need to start up front. I think you just need to be patient. And it's funny because we'll talk all race. When you're ripping lap times in the 15-second range on fresh tires, which will burn off over the course of this one, 100 laps is not a lot of time, but you do need to pace yourself a little bit to the point that you mentioned. Race control is going to penalize harshly. There is no point of gaining one spot here tonight by wrecking somebody just to sit for a week. So I think, opposite of what you might expect, discipline going to be the key here tonight from South Boston Speedway.
Drivers now wrapping up final practice for tonight, and what's expected to be an entertaining race here at South Boston Speedway. We've seen a mixture of types of races here. Long green flag runs for the whole length of the race. Sometimes attrition coming into play. What type of race will we get tonight? We're about to find out here on the Global SimRacing Channel. Practice is now officially wrapped up, and that means it's time to look towards your starting grid from South Boston. As the drivers now roll their way towards the starting grid, let's take a peek towards how these drivers will line up for tonight's action under the lights here at South Boston. It's Joe Sagawa who will get the chance to lead them to the green flag, followed by Adam Shane. Row 2 features James Lowe and Justin Morton after they had some rough races with some of the attrition built up at 5 flags. Matthew Thunhorst will start in 5th with Bruce Pearson in the 6th position. In row 4, it's Ryan Seneker and Jeffrey Harden, with row number 5 featuring Austin Belke. Mike Lemieux rounds out your top 10, Evan.
And continuing on through, Kurt Smith will double up with Donnie Moore to make up row number 6. It'll be 11th and 12th position on the starting grid, ahead of 13th place starter Lowell Jewell, with J.R. Shepard in 14th spot and Brian Dent back of the field. Number 23 machine starts 15th. Let's look top to bottom at your starting grid.
And already a bit of contact off the starting grid, it looks like, Evan. Mike Lemieux has a bit of back bumper damage and Donnie Moore front bumper damage after one car didn't get going off the launch. A bit of collisions here just before they got to the one-to-go signal here this time.
Yeah, that was the outside line that just did not go. I believe it was the 22 of Bruce Pearson who was parked, so maybe a touch of damage on the cars on the outside as the lights are off on top of the pace car.
See how these drivers will now race against one another with a little bit of scrapes that are going to be on their bumpers after the bits of contact there. But 100 laps from South Boston are all set to go. The Bootleg Racing League's Grand National Series all set to go green. Sagawa and Shane on the front row. Green flag is out. We're underway from Sobo. Oh, and a spinner in turn 3 and 4. It's Kurt Smith able to save it as they stay green. Kurt Smith goes back to 15th position. That could have been trouble as they fight hard for second.
He'll drop all the way now to 15th to the rear of the field after that number 6 car got sideways, started this race at 11th, and just had a little bit of help by the 40 car on the backstretch, but I think he might have got loose on his own downshifting to start, and a good catch. We stay green side by side for second. James Lowe trying to drive that 99 car past the 65.
65 not giving things up easily, and that's one of the constants when it comes to this racetrack is it can be hard to pass, as we talked about, because that second line can be a really good defensive line around this circuit if you run it right.
The passing is going to have to happen down low. I don't know how many drivers are going to try to go that long way around, but you're right, especially early in this run for Adam Shane here. He can use that top to defend. It looked all but guaranteed that Lowe was going to pass him at the end of the opening lap, but the 65 has stayed on it, and he run on board with the P4 runner right now. Matthew Thunhurst, fastest driver from practice earlier this evening, is going to front row seat of the side-by-side action, and Joe Segala up front not giving away for the battle for P2 on the back as the 81 car continues to lead after lap number 6.
Keep in mind that Thunhorst is 21st in the points entering tonight, and the interesting thing when it comes to him is he originally started, if you think back to North Wilkesboro, as a spotter for one of his friends who races in the major series along with them. Behind him, believe, is that friend Justin Morton, for example. Since then, has showed some great pace and looks to be one of the favorites potentially to win tonight with the track position. Just can't get side by side with Lowe. Shane holding on to the bottom now for second.
It certainly could have ended a lot worse for that SRT number 99 Lowe once he lost that spot to Shane, or didn't really lose anything because he tucks in line third where he started. Thought maybe that 8 machine of Thunhurst was going to be able to make a move, but opts not to, and cuts him a break, so you go on board with the 99. No changes. First, second, and third. It's Segala, Shane, and Lowe, exactly in the order that they run. But there was a bit of an early pass. Ratty Thunderhorst early in this race started fit, took a spot away from Morton, who drops down a spot, so the 8 car on the move early.
Keep in mind that Morton and Thunderhorst did share a paint scheme for their respective race last week, or earlier tonight, I should rather say, for the Modifieds, where they shared a Forge Racing paint scheme. But the top 4 right now dialed in 16 flats to 16 ones. As meanwhile, P10 continuing to heat up a little bit. That's where Lemieux is trying to defend a little bit. J.R. Shepard is trying to cut his way to the pack.
Just a lap ago, Lemieux was down on the inside of that 61 as Seneca, but the outside not working as good for Seneca as it did for Shane at the front of the field. So the 40's been able to get on through. Bring the 98, J.R. Shepard. He'll now go +3 on the night. He moves up to 11th. And next on deck, the number 23 machine of Brian Dean, I should say. So the 61 continues to go back. Let's ride on board with the number 98 machine and J.R. Shepard looking up to the 40 of Lemieux.
Oh, in trouble in front of him is Donnie Morse. Clips the apron. Caution is out. And J.R. Shepard just able to avoid any damage in that. That was close, Evan, for J.R. Shepard.
Close for Shepard and too close up the road for the 40 machine, who was not as fortunate. And Mike Lemieux got a big piece of this. Look at that. Moore catches the apron right there, spins that car all the way around, and the 40 car plows into the rear end. And I don't know how much damage is going to be on Lemieux, but he had no opportunity to avoid that one. Meanwhile, behind him, what a split. Watch Brian Dean and J.R. Shepard here, high and low, as they split the difference on that 26. So Moore and Lemieux involved, but certainly could have been a lot worse.
He has come down the pit lane to use some damage repair. Now with the 40 machine, it appears as one of the tricky things here at this racetrack. You go too low and clip that apron, it can be so easy, Evan, to just loop it around because you are just right below that yellow line.
It is easy, and I talked about how there's not a lot of space, right? In the corners, things feel like they open up more, right? You're not going to be down on the apron right there in the yellow stuff at a 4 because you don't want to shish kebab yourself onto the pit wall. But in the corner, especially if you're in a battle like those cars where if the car starts to get tight, you might be tempted to just get a little bit lower, put the tires under the line and help that thing rotate. But it is such a fine line, and it really isn't worth it. And, I mentioned that Moore went all the way around. That's what caught me off, Justin, is he didn't just clip the apron and get a little bit loose. I mean, the second he touched it, that thing spun all the way around like it was on ice.
That can happen a lot, unfortunately, for some of these drivers here with these cars, as already getting ready for the upcoming restart. One to go signal this time by. It's Joe Segala still leading. He has led all the laps so far, followed by Shane, Lowe, Thunhorst, Morton. Rounding up the top 5 at the moment, Bruce Pearson in 6th, Donkey Hardin, the top 8. Shepard is already up inside the top 9, up 5 positions plus Brian Dean, 9th and 10th, respectively. iRacing pace car is off. Back to green flag racing we go from South Boston. Oh, and already a bit of contact as Segala gets a bump from Shane's Lowe. Shane, meanwhile, able to hold on to second as Lowe backs up. Shane still forced to use the high line, though, off of 3 and 4.
He thought about pulling down on the back straightaway. He'll do it on the front stretch. Tucks in line behind Joe Segala, so no changes, first and second. But here comes Thunhorst, long way around in the number 8 Chevy Impala to the outside of the 99 at James Lowe. He'll have the run off of the corner, and that 8 car is on the charge as we ride with him.
Now looking to take away second position, in fact, as well, as Shane tries to hug the yellow line. Segala's moved up to the top to defend Thunhorst. Bit of a bobble now from him as he gets shuffled back single file. Back side by side. Meanwhile, Justin Morton also able to take advantage of the 99, passing by Low on the high side too.
And now the 8's in the difference here because they're side by side in front of him for the race lead, side by side behind for 4th, and he has pickings. Does he want to go high? Does he want to go low? It certainly looks like Shane has been able to get the nose to the inside of Segala. Has a real good look to go to the race lead for the first time tonight. The 81 machine going to stick right with him, lead at the stripe, but now the 8 can't choose up top because the 9 of Justin Morton's gone up there.
Side by side, 2 rows deep now as they look to shuffle it for the race lead. Shane trying to get the edge now on the 81. Slides up, and Shane to the race lead for the first time tonight with 75 laps to go. Thunhorse now looks to try fall suit. Lowe also joins the bottom line to keep it side by side, 2 rows deep. It's the 8 machine. Just about clears on by Segala.
And impressed at what we've seen for the 65, Justin. Good defensively on the outside early, good offensively on the bottom there. Shane was nearly a 9th placed car in the practice session earlier tonight, but he rockets to the race lead early, and we'll see if that is a maintainable speed as that 8 car at Thunhorse now breaks through to take over the number 2nd spot, and Joe Segala continues to slip just ahead of this scrap with the 9 machine of Morton up top and a 99 of Lowe trying to make the inside stick, but continuing to slide backwards.
It just seems there's a good amount of rubber buildup, yes, at the bottom of the racetrack, but the middle lines just seems to be the best line so far to make some of these moves, at least for a couple drivers. You have to wonder, though, Evan, how their tire wear is going to fare later on from using that middle line as Morton takes away 3rd position on the high line.
Takes that spot away, and all of a sudden, the outside really coming a much more to life than I was expecting. And I think that has to do with those cooler conditions. And we mentioned that it was overcast. That would help things in an afternoon race. Oh, and a spin from my front, and Adam Shane from the race lead goes around 2nd caution.
And an interesting sequence there as Matthew Thunhorst, as he went for the race lead, makes contact with the quarter panel of the 65 and sends him spinning of him. He's seen the hole and tried to take it.
And I just don't know if at lap number 30 to make the dive from a half a car like the back is the move. I mean, you see it there. There's no denying that the 8 car was closing in on the 65 machine of Shane that entire time, Justin. It just felt very abrupt. Look at the difference between these cars. Into turns 1 and 2, it's about a half a car like there. It gets down to maybe 4 or 5 feet, but you know, he doesn't really have much time to flash the nose. He just makes that dive down to the bottom, and I think the 65 machine, not expecting that to happen, takes his normal driving line and gets run over.
And for James Lowe, he's had to come in and use a fast repair. The reason? Well, because of this.
Second incident tonight, Justin. The heaviest damage comes from an innocent victim who was behind the initial bit of contact.
You can already see he got a clean race car with the fast repair. I was about to say that is heavy damage, where normally you can get away with a decent bit of it, even with the new damage model on the iRacing service for these cars, but when you get a hit that much, you have to get it repaired, especially since there's the chance for overheating and the engine damage.
Look at the plus minus on the left-hand side of your screen. Big moves, quiet for J.R. Shepard as the lights are off on top of the pace car. Started back in 14th spot. He's up to 4th. One of the fastest cars from practice, so we may have a new challenger entering the fold. See what he's got for the likes of Thunhorst, Morton, and Segala, who have been in control for most of this one.
And it should be a surprise to see Shepard up at the front, Evan. He has been a dominant force in this series, a multiple-time champion, and has had to cut his way up 10 positions. Green flag is out. Thunhorst off and away with Morton to the outside. Shepard looking to clear on by for 3rd position. Yes, he does. And this is where it gets interesting when it comes to Shepard here up front, because Shepard has been known for being a strong, long-run driver in this series, especially with the ability to save tires, as Morton looking to try and take away the race lead on the high side by side for the point.
Thunhorst bobbled at turn number 4, and it's allowed the 9 car to pull alongside him. Morton had the opportunity just off of the restart to tuck in line. He said no, stuck the nose to the outside, and leads at the end of lap number 36. So he feels like he can get the 9 car to the race lead the long way around. All this is going to do, though, is allow J.R. Shepard to close in from 3rd. The longer this battle for the race lead continues, again the 8 car loose off of turn 4.
A 4-tire drift, in fact, off the corner. As Morton tries to get the pinch, Morton gets a little bit loose as well now. Both of them squiggling in sideways as now Dunhorst trying to get himself fully clear, wiggles his way clear at the start and finish line. 62 laps to go in a fierce battle for the race lead as Shepard now dives to the inside for second.
So a quick turn of events for the 9. Looked like he was in the catbird, seated on board now with Shepard to the inside. Maybe third place at best for Morton here, but the 98 car a little bit tight that time. Turn 4 seems to be giving everybody on the inside issues. It was happening to the 8 of Thunhorst. It happened that time, even at a 2. The 98 of Shepard, and the outside a little bit slower through the corner, but if you can put the power down, which the inside seems to not be able to do off, that seems to balance everything out. And now the side-by-side actions for second as Thunhorst is setting sail.
Going running about a 1/10 of a second quicker than the rest of the field with the side-by-side fighting as caution flag is out, and it involves James Lowe at the back of the field having to slam the brakes because Kurt Smith and Lowell Jewell collide to bring us back under yellow in turn 3.
We'll see what happened with this one, and that's the number 6 of Kurt Smith. Behind him is Lowell Jewell in the 19. And as they head off and into turn number 1, Jewell establishes that inside position, and the contact's not going to happen until down here in 3, right there. I think that's a different story, Justin. The last incident, I think it was 2 cars going for the same space. I feel like they both knew each other were there. Might have been a case of Jewell being a little bit too high and Smith being a little bit too low, and it was the slightest of touches. This will be a good angle.
Yeah, you seen with the dotted lines just a little bit higher up as Lowe, wow. Ooh, just avoided getting absolutely demolished a second time this race.
Good piece of driving by James Lowe there, who we were on board with, who had a windshield full of smoke and sheet metal, but was able to lock it up, and the 6 car who got rolling pretty quick pulled out of his way. And then even behind him, Ryan Seneker almost plowed into the back of those 2, but he's able to avoid the contact, and we slow things down as we close it on halfway.
Look, we've been clicking laps away here at South Boston. Your thoughts on how this race has played out so far, Evan?
Well, I didn't expect the outside to be as, I don't want to say dominant, but to be as good of an option as it has been, right? I don't think that anybody had ever doubted that it was going to be a good defensive line, especially off of the restarts and early with it being a nighttime race. But that being said, we saw that 9 car. It didn't work for him, but Morton, like I said, could have gone in behind the 8 car, didn't, intentionally went up top, took a gamble, had a real good luck. We'll see if he's able to finish the job this time.
Coming to the restart, it's Dunhorst and Morton, Shepard and Sagawa, Belke and Shane, Dean and Hardin inside the inversion spots. Johnny Moore, Bruce Pearson round out the top 10. Green flags back out, a much better launch for the 8 this time. Able to get clear of Justin Morton this time as Morton still trying to use the high line. Shepard preferring to swing it on the bottom. Austin Belke, meanwhile, looking to keep himself inside the top 5, fighting hard for 4th position.
First time tonight we've seen the race leaders single file things out so quickly, and Segala once again stuck up on the outside of the racetrack. The 24 machine gonna clear that time at a turn 2, and now enter the 23 of Brian Dean, trying to continue his march through traffic as you look off of the back. A little bit of a bobble there for that 24 car.
And look at the facial emotions here for Belke as well. Laser focused on the cars at hand up in front. As Lowell Jewell has a problem at the back of the field. No caution, we stay green. Jewell hit by James Lowe from the 10th position.
You saw him just off of the back of that shot, and there he is down the back straightaway. Had a little bit of a touch from the 99. Caught it on the inside of 1 and 2. No caution, and we stay green. And here's how this incident happened off into 1 and 2.
And you're going to see it right there. Lowe sending it pretty hard. Lowell Jewell spinning off into the backstretch pit lane. Again, no caution flag. We stay green. Jewell now 13 seconds back of your race leader and just about in range to be lapped by your race leader in Thunhorst, who is already within 10 car lengths of it.
He is going to be catching it pretty quickly. Jewell off into 3. You can see Thunhorst halfway down the back straightaway at the moment, but fortunately did not trigger a yellow, and can't really put much blame on James Lowe there, Justin. You saw the 99, how much he caught Jewell in the corner, but it wasn't like 99 washed up at all. I mean, that's what happens when you got a P3 car in the race. Again, that 99 was so good up front early, you know, racing it in the teens it is just a bit of a difference on speed, and that's going to lead to some battling back in traffic. But we haven't seen the leaders have to deal with lap traffic so far tonight, and past halfway with 47 to go this next time by. If we break into a green flag run, could be a factor in the battle for the race win.
Absolutely. Battle for 10th position heating up. Lemieux keeping busy with a bit of a slide coming off the corner. It's Pearson trying to wheel it up on the high side still. James Lowe trying to get some valuable points. James Lowe, keep in mind, had a 20-point buffer in the point standings to second place entering tonight in the championship standings after 4 races, looking to try fall on the bottom side. Trying to make the move to get himself to 11th. Not able to clear by yet. Lemieux, though, has cleared on by Bruce Pearson to get to 10th.
Yeah, Pearson just looks very unstable up on the outside. I don't know if it's the 22 doesn't handle it up the road or if that's just not the lane that he wants to be in, but it just wasn't able to hold it smooth and pinch as much as some of the other drivers were defensively early in this race. So that's going to kick Pearson all the way down to 12th after he started this one into P6, and maybe some clean air would allow Lowe to pick up the pieces. If he can get around Mike Lemieux, he could break back in to the top 10, but that 40 machine's been pretty consistent back there. These drivers in traffic in the mid to low 16 threes back of the pack, 16 twos towards the front. Again, no additional sets of tires available. So these things are only going to handle worse and worse as we get down to the end of this 100-lap race.
Meanwhile, P6, that's where Joe Sagawa is trying to hold on for 5th position with Brian Dean and a swarm of other cars looking to try multiple different lines here. For Sagawa, this was one of the fears, the tire fall off. 0.3 of a lap of fall off compared to the race leaders for Joe Sagawa, and that's now really hurting him by running all those laps on the high line.
It'll eat away at it, and if you get involved in some of these incidents where you're spinning and locking up the tires, you can't come down and put a fresh set on either, so that's only going to hurt your race even more. So that goes back to the point I made when you asked what the key was going to be, is consistency and patience. And in some of these battles, you see this group starting to stack up. Jesse, you mentioned some of the earlier races, we were seeing people stack up, unable to make moves up on the outside. Got a big group here starting to catch Segala with Dean and everybody else, maybe 5 cars or so within 1 second of him at the moment. How patient do these drivers act before they start to get a little bit more antsy? There's that 65 car looking back down to the inside.
Trying to take away that position inside the top 6. Dean's giving a lot of space meanwhile to Shane, swinging it up all the way above the dashed marks in the corner. Still able to get the good run on corner exit. Although Donnie Moore watches along in this fight. By the way, Lil Jewel has pulled off the racetrack as Dean scrapes the wall. Jewel elected to come in a pit, came back down a second time, and now his car has been in the pit lane for the past 30 plus seconds. Lil Jewel now multiple laps down in 15th position as Dean gives a bit of a pinch this time to Shane as he scrapes the wall a second time in 3 laps.
I mean, the 23 felt like he should have been the driver moving up, right? He was on the bumper of Segala and putting on pressure, but it was just a bobble that opened things up enough for that 65 of Shane to get to the inside, and he's able to hold him off now, so we'll see if he can get things righted. Dean, an impressive +9 position, second biggest mover of them all, with the exception of J.R. Shepard in P2, but you see on the intervals left-hand side of your screen, Dunhorst comfortably in front with a mid-pack scraps, and that's where all the action is.
And keep in mind, this is an important part of the field because if you can keep yourself in the top 8, that's the inversion spots, yes. But these are valuable points, but also valuable track positions for the next race as well, which goes to Southern National.
It is. I mentioned that this was one of the shorter tracks on the calendar, and kind of at the halfway point, you've got some bigger tracks coming up, right? The likes of Myrtle Beach, obviously, Martinsville and Irwindale and the new Suburban when you get to the last 3 races of the year. So not the last of these small places. You got a Lanier on the calendar, but certainly these guys going to have a little bit more wiggle room in the coming weeks. And here it is again, that 65 machine of Shane back to the bottom on the 23.
Coming up to 31 to go, a bit of a sweep nearly up into the 23's door. And Dean now says, you know what? You want the position? give all of them a back. Dean all the way back to 10th position and into the wall, in fact, make it to 11th position as he lets by all those drivers and ducks down to the pit lane.
He's going to park it, and I don't know what happened with the 23 machine, but we'll take a ride on board here with Dean, and he was stuck on the outside. We talked about the frustration just with a couple of bobbles, leaving that top side open, and as you can see, he's not going to get into the fence until he gets off of the corner. I mean, he's letting all of these cars go, and then right there, maybe a touch, might have gotten away with it, maybe just some sparks and opts to park that. So not sure what the issue was with Deed, because I feel like he could have fought for that position, Justin, but he's down in the pit box, not retired. So maybe some sort of an issue with the sim rig or something else going to force him to park it early after being in a good spot.
Interesting scenario indeed, as meanwhile that's now opened up the floodgates for some of the other battles to form up. Hardin and Moore battling for 7th position. And Hardin talked about this a little bit earlier before this race tonight, where it's one of those tracks where you can run 95 great laps, mess one up, and take the field. And the reason, as we talked about, with the walls turning these cars into a tornado of metal, they can shoot then across the track tonight. We haven't really seen those types of incidents tonight. That's the main thing. A lot of long green flag runs for this evening. And this has all allowed James Lowe to enter the fray once more, Evan, to fight here to try and get himself back into the inversion spots.
And that's the key, is always looking forwards, right? We mentioned how much that invert played a role in this one. Thought that the drivers who started up towards the front of the field of this one would have had many more laps led than they did, but it was eventually taken over by the likes of Thunhorse, who started 5th, Shepard back from 14th. So the end-all be-all is always speed, as the 44 of Hardin trying to close off this pass on the 26 of Donnie Moore, and I think Moore's just going to back it off just a little bit there and allow the 44 car to go on through. The number 99 machine, James Lowe, almost a touch that time also. So closing laps, they're fighting for these spots after the 26 and Moore came off the fence a little bit.
Getting a little bit dicey indeed, as Lowe over the back bumper of Moore. Moore a little bit of a slide again off turn 4, scraping that right rear against the wall once more. Can't find the move quite yet. Lemieux also losing ground to these machines, as Lowe, it looks like, has now picked up on something. He's trying to change up the line to try and build up a run by diming the corners and using a bit of that banking, as much as there is here at South Boston, keep in mind, to use the corner as a ramp.
And the onboard look here is good, because one thing that we haven't touched on is there's a lot of movement in the corners, right? I mean, you can see it with the onboard there with Lowe. He enters much higher. Look at this end of the racetrack, almost a whole car length higher up, but then he tries to cut it back down. Wasn't able to do so on Donnie Moore that time, but it is hard to hit that same line every time. Now this time he will look to the inside, opposite of what happened last time. So I think James Lowe's at the point where he's just searching for whatever he can, is up the road with Joe Segala side by side. The 81 car under fire as Shane looks down to the inside. This one a fight for 5th.
Segala once more up on that top line, as Shane getting very loose coming off of turn 4 that time, able to hold on to it. Just can't clear on by the 81, and this has been the strong suit for Segala. Has been able to defend for several laps. The trouble has been, as we've seen, keeping it side by side and full. Shane, though, looks like he's burned up that right rear tire a little bit with all this scrapping.
Yeah, the 44, honestly, Justin, quiet early in this one, but Jeffrey Hardin trying to get into the picture late and has the opportunity, if the 65 of the 81 may come to blows, to get a handful of spots here late in the going. Next time by, 15 laps to go from South Boston Speedway, and the best stuff continues to be mid-pack, as 65 of Shane will not give up on the inside.
And Shane nearly coming up into Segala, coming off the corner. In fact, he's slipping and sliding so much, trying to hug that yellow line still, and Hardin has already chosen to take the second line in the corners. Preparation for this fight. Now moves to the bottom line to try and push on forward the momentum with Shane. They are reeling in traffic of Ryan Seneca up the road, keep in mind, which could be a factor in this fight. Coming up to 13 to go. That's currently 6 car lengths up the road as Shane sends it, licks the stamp, and able to send it just about clear.
And still squeezed on the outside, but not deterred as Joe Segala, that 65 car of Adam Shane, barely gave him enough room at a 4, stuck with it. Now back into 3 and 4 again, working lap 88, the 65 trying to get all the way clear, but just can't put the power down. And that 81 machine has brought now another driver to the mix. Justin, we were talking about the 44 Hardin, but James Lowe now arriving on the scene, and more drivers not that far behind, and the likes of Donnie Moore and Mike Lemieux. So this side-by-side hurting these two, and now lap traffic up the road. Do they find a way through? A smidge of hesitation, and it might cost Segala the spot.
Well, we keep it side by side, just barely does, just about hit the right rear quarter panel of the 65 machine. As this has been heavy battling, Shane finally clears on by, but a contact with Hardin as Hardin now gets shuffled to the bottom of the racetrack. James Lowe up to the top line. This is all happening about a quarter of the track in front of the race leaders with under 10 laps to go. As up at the front, J.R. Shepherd has been running second for much of this race behind Thunhorse. He has closed what was a 0.7 of a second gap down to 0.2. He is now ready to charge.
And he has been inching his way through. The difference between first and second was once nearly a whole second, but the 98 J.R. Shepherd, way back from 14th on the grid, needs one more spot, and Thunhorse leaves the inside open. Justin, that 8 car sliding at a turn 4. Here's the move to the inside, but a caution.
Caution is out, and it involves that battle group we were talking about just behind it, possibly. Ryan Seneker ends up spinning around after a massive stack up in that big group, where James Lowe goes around to the 99 and collects Lemieux.
And you'll see it here. This was the battle that we were watching for the longest time. And right there, the 99 just washes up. I think it's hard to place blame there on Segala, but 99 Lowe washes up in front of him, gets tagged and turned around and collected in that one. That 40 machine of Mike Lemieux as well as Donnie Moore.
That's going to set up an interesting restart to close things out. The final restart, potentially the race, as see one more look. Man, just nowhere for several drivers to go. Ryan Seneker is the one who goes around fully, though. That's the main trigger for the caution flag, but still, it's going to be a tough points night potentially for Lowe now, involved in his second major incident of the race.
Another yellow, slow things down, and I wonder if this ends up hurting J.R. Shepherd, Justin, because that was it, right? He made the move to the inside. He had the look to go to the race lead, and the yellow came out instantly just in front of him, to the point that those drivers were almost involved in the incident. However, I think a restart puts Shepherd even more on the back foot, and this yellow may end up saving Matthew Thunhorst.
I was going to say, is there going to be enough time for him to make the move, you think?
I feel like he would have been better off without the caution. So Shepherd's definitely going to have his fight up for him. And keep in mind, he may be held up by that 9 machine of Justin Morton, who you ride on, or just behind, I should say, who you ride on board with the 98 machine. Morton's going to do everything he can to get underneath the 98 machine, and that's only going to further complicate things for Shepherd up top.
And the lights are out. Final restart coming up here. We're past the point of no return for this race. 2-lap shootout to decide it. If they take the white flag, the race is official. Thunhorst, Shepherd, Morton, Bunke, Shane, your top 5 for this restart. 2 laps to go from South Boston. Pace car is off, green flag is out. And a great launch by Shepherd keeps it side by side into the corner.
And it's key for Shepherd because he has room to get underneath the 8 car if he wants, but he'll decide to fight on the outside, keeping it on side by side for the race lead as they look for the white flag.
White flag waves. Final lap from South Boston. Will be Thunhorst or will be Shepherd. Side by side still, coming off the corner. Shepherd trying to squeeze. Thunhorst trying to hug the old line. One last chance for Shepherd on the high line. Thunhorst is loose. He gets to the door of Thunhorst. Side by side at the stripe. It's Shepherd who wins it. Shepherd by 8/1000ths of a second.
And overcomes having to go through the late race restart. Sticks it on the outside. They may have touched off the corner, but they kept it clean. The 8 car at Thunhorst left him room to fight with, and what a win for J.R. Shepherd on the outside to drive through the field, Justin, and get the win at South Boston Speedway. Let's take a look.
And it's a photo finish. Take a look at this off turn 4. Both of them were going full out, and Shepherd actually had to use up Thornhurst a little bit on the door to keep his car straight.
And I had to wait to look to the timing screen because it was that close at the start-finish line. And as you mentioned, 8/1000ths of a second. The number 98 car, the one that's going to park it on the front straightaway. What a win for J.R. Shepherd.
Post-race coverage coming up in just a few moments. You're watching the Global Sim Racing Channel of the virtual South Boston Speedway. Welcome back to the Global Sim Racing Channel's coverage of the Bootleg Racing League and its Grand National Series. And boy, what a finish tonight. 8/1000ths of a second is the difference between winner J.R. Shepherd and Matthew Thunhorst in a drag race on a 2-lap shootout. Justin Morton rounded out the top 3 tonight, 0.3 of a second back. Austin Belke going from 9th to 4th to round out the top 4. Adam Shane rounded out the top 5 with Jeffrey Hart and Donnie Moore and Joe Sagawa rounding out the inversion spots tonight, with James Lowe in 9th position. Going to be tough sledding for the next race potentially, with Kurt Smith rounding out your top 10, Evan.
Yeah, 2 more drivers finished this one on the lead lap. Going to be Mike Lemieux in the number 11 spot, along with Bruce Pearson in 12th. 1 lap down late for Ryan Seneker. Brian Dean drops off for 14th, and an early retirement for Lowell Jewell in 15th position. I'll look top to bottom.
That's a look at your race results for tonight. What a finish to this one. And Evan, it came down to essentially one chance, one corner for him to fight for that race win.
And he didn't blow the opportunity either, right? He had to work for that long green flag run to close the gap. Like I mentioned, it was basically 8/7 of a second for the longest time, but really started to save, and maybe he did save Justin over the course of that run, but really started to put it down in those final 10 laps, closed it in, thought maybe the yellow was going to hurt him. Instead, he ends up in victory lane. Great drive for the 98.
You have the opportunity to now speak with J.R. Shepherd after that close photo finish. He's won plenty of races in the series, but that was one of the closest I think he's had to fight for. JR, how are you feeling about that photo finish tonight?
I did not want that last caution to come out. I had to start in the back for missing last week, and I was trying to be extremely patient and take care of the tires, especially the rear tires, because I knew they'd wear out pretty quick. And Unfortunately, I had to race some guys pretty hard, and once I got into second place, I was just saving, and I could tell that he was getting a little bit loose up ahead of me, so I knew that I could catch him. I just knew it'd be in the last 10 laps, and right when I got to the inside of him, the caution came out. So I was pretty disappointed with that, and at that point, I thought it was over with.
Yeah, how difficult was it to try and cut your way to the field tonight, especially since this is a track that can be hard to pass at?
It's extremely hard to pass that, just in general. The outside line has gotten a little tighter over the years, but it's still preferred when you're beside somebody long term. And these Grand National cars just did not have the gearing that we needed. You just could not turn enough RPM, so it was really hard to pass somebody once you got to the inside of them.
Now, the next race goes to Southern National. Your thoughts on going to that race now for the midway portion of the season, essentially?
It's usually a track that puts on a pretty good race. It's definitely one of those tracks where you got to watch your front tires because you can wear them out really fast and not even realize you're doing it. So got to pay attention to that, and we'll just see how it goes. Hopefully, we can have a pretty good race there.
Anyone you want to thank for the run tonight?
Just extremely thankful to the Bootleg Racing League for allowing us to do this each and every week on Friday nights and Saturday nights. It's a great place to come hang out and race, and just thanks to my team, Different Path Motorsports, and everything that GSRC does for the broadcasting guys. We really appreciate it.
Congratulations on the photo finish tonight, JR.
I appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
JR Shepard with a big victory tonight, taking on the checker flag by 1/1000 of a second over Matthew Thunhorse. Matt is with Evan Pizzoco.
We're going to go down trackside and see if we can get a word with the number 8 machine of Matthew Thunhorst, who comes home in second position in this race. And, it was the 8/1000th of a second a difference for the race win, Justin. I think we'll get with Matt in a minute here, but for the meantime, I think we got Justin Morton dialed up on the radio. Justin, you got us?
Yeah, I got you.
Well, you had quite a good view, I think, of all of the action up the road. And, this one looked like it was going to end on a green flag run to the end of it. Ended up being in a bit of a shootout, but we saw a lot of drivers either fall way back or go way up. And you did a pretty good job of maintaining track position tonight. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I was definitely trying to maintain that track position. I had a good starting position from the reverse grid. It just worked out. Managed to follow Matt around most of the race. Good teammate, somebody to work with for me. Yeah, it was a blast to watch JR and Matt battle that out. I was trying to actually keep up with them to keep watching it, so I was doing my best there.
Of course, this was a race where we thought that the outside was going to be an option, certainly for some of those defensive moves, but it appeared to be a little bit more lively than maybe I had anticipated. How did that work in based on what you were expecting and, it being a night race at all? I wonder if that had a factor.
Yeah, I had a feeling the outside would be in. It was in during our tour modified race. I managed to make a bunch of passes there in that race, and in this race, I think I managed to pass a bunch on the outside too, on one of the restarts. So I knew it was there, but once the tires fell off, it was definitely going away.
Of course, you guys have about a half a season left to go in this BRL Grand National Series. What are some of the positives you can take from this one, especially considering the fact that you're going to have a pretty similar starting position next time out as you did here tonight based on that finishing spot for the invert as we continue this championship next week as we head over to Southern National?
Yeah, it should be a good starting position. Overall for the season, Mr. Race, we don't have any drop races, so I'm kind of out of the championship, but I'm out here just trying to get more wins. It's a great group of guys to run with.
We appreciate you sticking around and chatting with us, Justin. Congratulations on the podium finish.
Thank you.
The third place finisher tonight from the virtual South Boston Speedway, Justin Morton, comes home in third. And to our Justin, JP, head back over to you with Matthew Thunhorse, B2.
Yes, now we have Matt dialed up. And Matt, you led a majority of the laps tonight in the second half of the race, and then the closing stages. Talk us through this one after leading 68 laps and then losing by just 8/1000th of a second.
You got me?
Yes, we do.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I feel it was a pretty strong race. I mean, I know part of the reason why I led so many laps is just because JR had to start from the back. So, I mean, you can sit there and say, well, if he was up front, he would have been all over me anyway, or, maybe the cautions fell. But, I mean, I kind of haven't really raced against him, so I got a feel for, kind of how the lines he took, and I kind of figured out why he got me, except by the time I did, and I realized his lines, I'd already burnt my stuff up. So, he's definitely a really good tire saver. And so, I mean, I led a lot of the race. Aside from him, I think I put on a good performance, and, I think he would have gotten me without that last caution, and then, he still snookered me anyway, and, I thought I had a chance, and then I saw after it updated, I finished second, and it's kind of a bummer, but at the same time, you still finished second, so, I mean, you lead a lot of laps, but, with you crowd of guys like this, you can kind of take some pride in the fact that you did so well for so long in the race.
And how difficult is it overall to save the tires? You mentioned you felt you burned stuff up a little bit, and JR picked up that you were a little bit loose. How difficult was it to try and keep that tire wear balance throughout the night to make sure you didn't have that happen in the closing stages?
Well, it's weird because of the way Sobo drives that, 1 and 2 is so tight and 3 and 4 is so loose. And, so I think I was tearing my stuff up through 1 and 2 because I was taking that low line. He was using that decreasing radius kind of apex. And, I was tearing my right rear up, and then 3 and 4 is loose. So I just, too many times I just got a little throttle happy, and all of a sudden the rear end would step out. So, it's just, I need to work on my discipline a little bit more, but, it's just, it's so easy with these cars to think, oh, okay, here we go, hit the throttle, and next thing you know, all of a sudden your rear end's sitting there going for a boogie.
Interesting way to put it. And next race we boogie on over to is Southern National. Your thoughts on going over there?
I don't know if I'll be able to make that race, but I don't think I've ever raced at Southern National. But from what I've seen, it's kind of like a maybe a bit wider of a new Smyrna or something. So I don't know. We'll see. Put a little practice and see what it is. So we'll see what happens next week. I guess the folks will have to tune in for that one.
Anyone you want to thank for your run tonight?
Yeah, just Lowell for putting on this league, and y'all for broadcasting. And I have to give a special shout out tonight because I probably wouldn't be racing because I had a little bit of car trouble, and I had my dad come out, and he drove quite a far ways to get to me and help me out and fix out what was happening with my car. So shout out to him tonight, and it's only because of him that I was even able to race and be able to put on a performance for y'all.
Congratulations on the run tonight, Matt.
Thank you much.
Matt the Thunhorse coming away with the second place finish tonight after the win last week. And Evan, your final thoughts on this one, because this was a thrower for the mid-pack and a thrower to close out the front.
I'm having a great night, Justin, and happy to be doing it here with you guys on the Global SimRacing Channel. And what a way to welcome me back, right? I mean, doing the Bootleg Racing League, and at that point, I believe it was the Modifieds here on GSRC, and now doing it with the Grand National Series. I mean, it's always such a good time. A staple on Saturday nights here on the service. And I was pretty impressed with how well these drivers were able to move through traffic, right? I know I talked about tempers and controlling yourself a little bit. And I think for the most part, nobody was really driving over their heads. And you cannot beat an 8/1000th of a second finish. I mean, just a great showing for those guys to both keep it clean to the end of the race, I think, notably. And the opportunity to hear from both of them post-race is great stuff. So happy that you guys let me jump back into booth for this one, and certainly got treated to a fantastic finish.
Absolutely. And on that note, we'd like to thank you for tuning in to tonight's exciting action here from South Boston. We'd also like to thank the Bootleg Racing League for organizing this exciting series. We'd also like to thank the companies who provide the software and hardware for broadcasts listed on screen. Additional thanks to Julie Warner provides wonderful music. See the screen for how to get a hold of more of our great work. Thanks to the team tonight at Evan and Sean. If you'd like to find out more about GSRC, including upcoming races, you can find it at globalsimracingchannel.com. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can check our merchandise for sale at gsrc.storempy.com, or you can check out our social media on Twitter at GSR Channel, Facebook at Global SimRacing Channel, and Instagram at GSRC_Graham. Don't forget to head over to YouTube page and hit that big red subscribe button, as well as the notification bell, so you don't miss a moment here at Global SimRacing Channel. As mentioned, the next race goes to Southern National Speedway, or Southern National Motorsports Park, I should rather say, for the next race of the campaign. Coverage starts at approximately 8:50 p.m. Eastern Time on May the 8th. Be sure to tune in. We also have upcoming races for other series on screen, so be sure to check those out and mark them down in your calendar. Until next time, race hard, race clean rather, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.